glad you're here. Our next speaker is Mr. Ira Chaleff, an executive leadership coach with extensive writing on followership. He's penned 2 major books, one called The Courageous Follower, another The Art of Followership, and has earned a reputation as a pioneer in the field. His work strips away the idea of passive connotations of what it means to be a follower. Leadership Excellence magazine has ranked him one of the top 100 best minds in leadership. Mr. Ira Chaleff.
Thank you for the promotion to top 10 there.
Oh.
Field promotion. Yeah. I have some prepared remarks, but I want to start off with acknowledging something that I heard on the news today, which was the death of the singer and songwriter Pete Seeger. Generationally, many of you may not know him, but you know of his work as he brought songs such as This Land Is Your Land and We Shall Overcome to our national culture. And there is a song that he wrote, which I always think of as a very, very cautionary tale about leading and following. And it's called Waist Deep in the Big Muddy. And it's about a captain who ordered his troops to ford a river at a place where his sergeant was warning him, do not cross, the water's too deep. And the captain didn't listen to his experienced follower, and he wound up drowning. And the sergeant then ordered the rest of the company back onto the shore to find a safer place to ford the river. I commend to you this song as you become leaders in your own right. 20 years ago, when I began writing my first book on followership, spell check would ask, did I mean fellowship? It didn't recognize the word followership. And today we're at a conference on followership at the U.S. Naval Academy. We've come a long way. When I asked Lieutenant Commander Kelly Welsh how the conference topic was chosen, she gave credit to the group of midshipmen who worked on the program. To me, their choice signifies a generational leap of some significance, and I thank them for it. I'm going to do a little test with you here. When you applied to college or to the academy, how many of you were asked to describe your leadership experiences? Please raise your hands. Look around. Everyone. Thank you. Put your hands down. And how many of you were asked on these applications, what was your followership contribution? No hands go up. So you see that generationally, and this I'm talking about my generation, we, I believe, misdefined follower as a personality type. We now understand it as a role. Everyone is a follower at times. If the Secretary of Defense isn't also a good follower, we have a constitutional crisis. So it goes all the way up as far as you can go. 20 years ago, I read an analysis of the events at My Lai in Vietnam. The author asked, how could a couple hundred American soldiers participate in a massacre and a cover-up? We think of ourselves as better than that, and we are better than that. How did this happen? He speculated that when individuals are in the follower role, they can displace their moral responsibility onto the leader. Right then, I wrote in the margin of the book, we need a book on a new way of following, and that's what I've attempted to do. In my model, followers don't serve leaders. That's an intentionally provocative statement. Both followers and leaders serve the mission, and they are both accountable for doing so according to a shared set of values. This is easy to say, but to do so requires courage. Not physical courage, but social courage. The willingness to stand up and stand out, and that's not always easy, as you know. Deference to hierarchy is wired into all cultures in varying degrees. Therefore, professional development requires preparing people to only be deferential when doing so is appropriate. Sometimes, deference is fatal. And this is not theoretical. The aviation industry in the 1970s found that most major fatal airline crashes occurred when a crew member did not speak up assertively enough to command in the face of situational danger. A role-play training program called Crew Resource Management became mandatory in all civil and military aviation. It prepared junior crew members to be sufficiently assertive when command has a blind spot. The safety record improved dramatically. Two behaviors of courageous followership are the courage to support the leader and the courage to question the leader. If these are developed in balance, command is more prone to listen to feedback from below. When this occurs, ethical transgressions can often be preempted. Nevertheless, sometimes taking a hard ethical line is required. Junior and mid-level officers must be inculcated with the skills to do so. If a flag officer is removed on grounds of a hostile ship environment, the officers below him or her share accountability. They didn't communicate early enough and firmly enough the impact of the senior officer's behavior so it could be corrected. Of course, there's risk in doing this. It still needs to be done. And while difficult, the actions can be successful and do not need to ruin a career. The highest profile example we have of this today in Washington, D.C. is the actions taken by James Comey when he was Deputy Attorney General. He and other senior leaders in the FBI and the CIA were prepared to resign if the White House insisted on an extension of warrantless wiretapping when it did not comply with the law as written at the time. Today, James Comey is the director of the FBI, having been confirmed by the Senate as a courageous civil servant. Mid-level executives and mid-grade officers must be prepared to courageously stand for doing the right thing at the right time. The attitude and skills of following courageously must be part of professional development curricula. I submit to you that the Academy can model this for the nation and for the world by incorporating these skills in midshipman training and assessment. Thank you.
Hello, thank you so much for being here today. This question is for the panel as a whole. What is your advice to young professionals who find themselves in a situation where their personal values egregiously conflict with the actions of their senior leadership? And what should be the first step on the part of the follower in solving the conflict?
Mr. Chaleff, would you like to begin?
Well, my first counsel would be to talk about that with your peers. That's part of the self-reflection. Even though my work talks a lot about how to help followers, help leaders see into their blind spots, we all have blind spots. So it could be that your sense of conflict with your leaders are stemming from something within you that should be examined first. But if you've done that, and you are clear that there is a values conflict, then you need to construct a conversation to try to engage the leader and help the leader see what it is that you are having a problem with. Now, one of the ways to do this is to put yourself in the leader's shoes and say, what does my leader at this time in their career, in this situation they're in, what does he or she value? Because what he or she values is what they are going to pay attention to. So, for example, if you frame the problem you're having in terms of unit morale, and you know they value unit morale highly, you have a good chance of them listening to your perspective. And you then, I encourage you, if it's a difficult conversation and the scenario you're painting is inherently a difficult situation, I encourage people to work out what it is they want to say, even role play it if necessary first, before they have the conversation, and then be prepared to get some blowback from that conversation and not be thrown by it, but to stay clear on what it is you're trying to engage the leader about. Your job is not to get the leader to accept necessarily your proposal. It's to get the leader to engage in understanding of what the values issue is. And once he or she has done that, then a productive dialogue can occur and some productive solutions can emerge.
Michael Downing, Newport News, Virginia, study at Christopher Newport. This question is for the whole panel. I come from a very heavy military family, and what they have taught me is to treat people right, that luck is when preparedness meets opportunity, that true leaders emerge when the time's right and it's necessary. You work hard, you be open to critiques and other opinions. You know your people, you stand by your soul, and you tend to it, and be able to look at yourself in the mirror at night and say, God damn it, I did a good job today. Now, this whole discussion on followership, in your experiences, what is different than that? Is followership different and deeper than all the basic things we've learned as children and potential military men and women?
Followership, as we think of it, usually occurs in hierarchy. And hierarchy has a tendency to create a certain distortion in relationships. Hierarchy is critical. We have to have hierarchy in order to make large decisions and critical decisions. But what happens too often is that while hierarchy is an external role that tells us who can make what decision when, we too often internalize hierarchy, and we have this unexamined rule set as to how we are supposed to behave when we are in authority and when we are speaking to authority. And if that rule set isn't examined, it can interfere with the transmission of critical information so that the best decisions possible are made by the unit of leaders and followers. So there is an additional burden when you're in a formal follower role to be able to rise above the social constraints placed on that role. And when you have important data, important perspectives that will make a difference to the outcome or to the adherence to the values that are at stake, that you speak your voice effectively, clearly, humbly at times, but sufficiently assertively that you are heard and the people who need to hear you pay attention. So there's a certain skill set as well as attitude that goes with effective followership that we haven't always sufficiently developed, and that is critical that we learn to develop, particularly in our officer corps. I can also say that courage, peer-to-peer courage, is as essential as upward courage. We all want to be fully accepted within our peer groups. So sometimes we stay silent when we observe our peers walking too close to ethical lines or crossing them. I think that's a critical practice ground for any of us, is to find the moral courage to take a stance with our peers and start to create that ethical culture at our level. Then if we see transgressions occurring at higher levels, we have sort of developed our ethical muscle, if we will, to take on the more difficult task of orchestrating those conversations up the chain of command.
Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. Cadet Dickey from Virginia Tech. Mr. Chaleff, it was said earlier that leaders aren't born, but they are created. You said a follower is a role, not a personality type. So my question is, are there those who are born to be better followers, to fit that role better, or are they created? And if they are created, how do we as leaders help our subordinates develop good followership so they, in turn, can be better leaders?
Yeah, it's a very interesting question because some people after my seminars or workshops come up to me and say, you know, I always have been more comfortable in the follower role, and I've always felt a little badly that I don't aspire to be a leader. And you've helped me understand that the follower role is equally honorable if it's done well. So I think there is some variation in human drive. But nevertheless, I think it's the individuals who are in the formal leader roles can do a lot to create an environment in which what I call courageous followership is valued rather than just compliant followership. Remember, courageous followers support their leaders 100%, despite difficulty, danger, challenges, if what the leader is doing is seeming to support the mission and the values. We only get into the dissent or the divergence where what the leader is doing is threatening the values or the mission for whatever reason. So leaders who create an environment in which they clearly do value dissenting views or divergent views before they make their final decisions help create the most effective type of followership. I spoke at the War College a number of years ago, and one of the officers said, at every meeting, we appoint someone to be devil's advocate, except, frankly, they used a little more racy term. D stood for designated, and I won't tell you what A stood for. But the point was that they institutionalized the role and the value of divergent thinking and divergent speaking. And I think that leaders can play an important role in that regard. However, I have to be quick to respond that we can't put the full onus of this on our formal leaders. As followers, even if the leader is not creating that kind of milieu, we have to have the courage to speak according to the values and information that we're working on. So followers need to dig deep and find additional courage when needed. Leaders need to create an environment in which less social courage is needed in order to speak up.